this revolution has been growing rapidly, especially in the last few years. It's really gaining momentum and it's growing everywhere. It's not just the aficionados who are really, the old greenies from years ago. It's not. It's actually going into the mainstream.
I'm Adam Jones. This is the Future of Structures podcast. Tina Perinotto is the managing editor, publisher and founder of The Fifth Estate, an online newspaper for green buildings and sustainable cities established in 2009. So The Fifth Estate has become a central reading for business people, investors, designers, consultants, government officials and politicians working towards a more sustainable built environment. With the latest in property landing on Tina's desk every single day, she certainly has the finger on the pulse for the whole property industry. So in this episode, we talk about the potential for the Nightingale development model, the long-term trends that are shaping our future and our cities, and advice for professionals in the ever-changing future that is on the horizon. I hope you guys enjoy listening to Tina as much as I did speaking to her. She's definitely a very wise lady who knows a lot and has a long history in the whole property industry. So without any further ado, here is Tina Perinotto, the founder of The Fifth Estate.
Thanks, Adam. I started as a journalist writing about property right from the beginning, actually, in Melbourne on a publication called Property News. Then that was bought by BRW. I ended up doing a magazine there that was a quarterly, which I loved, and a little newsletter on property investment called Property Action. Then the Property Council, where I edited the magazine for 6 years and was also communications manager for them. Then went to the Fin Review for another 6 years and worked on the property desk there, doing some, a whole range of stories, but always insisting on writing about environmental issues. And eventually they gave me a column, which was a bit of a surprise. It's every week where I could actually just mouth off really about the environment or property or whatever I liked. But it was mostly about planning issues and environmental issues that I like to write about. Well, the message of the Fifth Estate is really that sustainability is a logical, rational thing to do and that it's a good business investment. We're primarily a business publication and the inspiration for it was really to try and be, I suppose, a kind of financial review for sustainability. We try to be balanced and impartial most of the time, apart from our editorials where we might have a bit of a strong opinion from time to time. But basically that's the what we try to do.
Cool. And with this trend in sustainability, what have you seen in your career covering the whole property industry?
It's come from, I suppose, nowhere. When I went to the Property Council, if you mentioned the word environment or sustainability wasn't really a word, it was environmental issues, they really thought you were a rat bag. So I went there with the proviso that we could write about environmental issues. And they were done by agreement on the basis that these were really important issues, that the world was changing. We were hearing about climate change and sea level rises, and that property developers, it was good for them to know this. This is something they needed to know to stay in front of the curve.
Yeah.
And from then on, it's kind of evolved, and the property industry, in my opinion, has led other industries in sustainability and understanding that they've got to really recreate their built environment in a sustainable format.
Absolutely. And who do you see as the big leaders, taking the big steps in the direction of sustainability?
Oh, okay. That's an interesting question. Well, I suppose in the early days, Lend-Lease was a real leader, and they probably are still a real leader. It's a bit unfair to say that they're not, with Barangaroo and things, but they did 30 the Bond, and that was pretty fantastic, a 5-star building. We've got Fraser's property now are really good. They've got an urban farm at Burwood, which I think is fantastic, and they're doing Living Building Challenge. They're great leaders. And then you've got individuals and, that amazing grassroots movement that's coming up from, driving developments like the Nightingale and co-housing and things like that. But the Nightingale is really quite stunning. It just captures people's imaginations. Nightingale is basically predicated on knowing who the end buyers are going to be. So they've got a waiting list of people. At the moment, they've got 5,200 people on the waiting list. They sell only to people who are going to live in the apartments, so no investors. They cap their profits at 15%, the developers who are really it's jointly between the architects who are driving the development and the end buyers, so they collaborate on it. So they're really cutting out the middleman. It's a kind of Uberization of development, I suppose.
Yeah, amazing. So do you think this kind of model might be significant in the future? I mean, Uber took down the taxi industry, so we say that Uber for X quite a lot about a lot of different things. Do you think it could potentially revolutionise the whole model of development?
From what I understand, I can just see it growing like wildfire, and I haven't heard of anything like this in other parts of the world, although I think Jason Twill says, deliberative development's going on over there, which is another sort of technical term for it. I think it is really inspiring it, but it is very difficult. It's not easy. So you need the right land prices. In Melbourne, it's possible. In Sydney, we haven't seen one yet. So it's about the market as well. But I know that conventional developers are looking at it, and Jeremy McLeod, who leads Nightingale in Melbourne, says that they're lining up to go through the apartments now. Once a week, they're open for inspection, as a tour, and the mainstream developers are starting to become very interested.
Yeah, amazing. And moving back onto this idea of sustainability, you mentioned how Lend-Lease made a lot of ground in Barangaroo. With I was just actually near Barangaroo looking at International House, and next to that they've got a sister building going up called C1, which is going to be even bigger than International House, and they're doing K5 and in Brisbane, which will be the tallest office building in the world, and using sustainably sourced timber, which is obviously a carbon positive material. And Frasers, I actually spoke to Paolo Bevilacqua, who is the head of sustainability at Frasers, and they've got this goal of getting to zero emissions within 10 years. So very ambitious there. Do you see these ambitious leaders getting the financial returns?
Well, they seem to, otherwise they wouldn't do it, because I think they've got to look after their shareholders before everything else. And, what's good about the leading property companies is that they've actually created a formula that they understand that being sustainable and groundbreaking and innovative is actually good for business. And the tenants, the big tenants, are flooding to these properties. They like it and they're responding to it. So they're getting the rewards. It's a lot harder for other companies.
And what about the consumer trends? Do you see anything in that space?
Yes, I think consumers are really interesting. There's a very strong grassroots movement. It's going back for years, but I think in the last few years it's really starting to grow. People are very concerned about climate. There's not many people that deny it anymore these days that have got any credibility, in my view. But you see survey after survey with consumers supporting sustainability and climate action and renewable energy, and you only have to look at the number of solar panels on the roof, and for whatever reason they're there. Some people are doing it simply to save money, but you also see the evidence of consumer trends in the big supermarkets, who do a lot of research. So they've got a lot of money to spend on consumer research, and they are doing sustainably sourced seafoods and organic meats and chicken and etc. So that to me is evidence that of changes going on.
There's a quote by Al Gore: "We are in the early stages of a sustainability revolution with the magnitude of the industrial revolution and speed of the digital." So what do you see in terms of this big revolution? I know I just stole that quote from you, which I took from one of your presentations once.
Well, I stole it from Al Gore because it's just so brilliant and it just captures it. And I've actually believed that this is going to happen. I've believed that for a long time, that we really have to transform the whole world. I mean, it's a case of wanting to survive and wanting the planet to survive in the best shape as possible. We may not have the planet we had 100 years ago, but we've got to do our best to make the choices. And I think that this revolution has been growing rapidly, especially in the last few years. It's really gaining momentum and it's growing everywhere. It's not just the aficionados who are really, the old greenies from years ago. It's not. It's actually going into the mainstream.
Absolutely. I think sometimes when I think about sustainability in general, it's like, we got to go in that direction either by choice, and if we're proactive about it, or on the other hand, by necessity, if, we get a big few shocks to the system.
Yes, unfortunately the shocks, we've had quite a few shocks already, but the human mind is really designed to forget pain and shock, and we quickly get over it. So it's really hard to remember those lessons, but the people who do remember the lessons are the financial markets and the insurance companies, and they're pricing risk. They don't muck around. I was just reading the other day that insurers are actually moved right out of insuring a lot of property in a lot of areas that are low-lying or in any way dangerous or exposed to climate. I do see that they're pricing that in. You see that coal is no longer a viable financial investment, that new coal-fired power stations are highly unlikely. They're really looking to get a whole lot of government subsidies, i.e. the taxpayer to pay for it. Well, that's not going to work. And you've got the big investment in institutional companies around the world starting to go more towards sustainable investments and impact investments.
Recently I read an article that said how Australia's biggest two exports, one is coal and the other is iron ore. So, do you think Australia is going to change quite a bit if two of our biggest exports are two of the things that are causing the world's greatest emissions? And from the front level, you see a lot of the news coming through. Are we moving away from coal and iron ore, especially with projects on the horizon like Adani? I'm not sure what's happening there either.
Nobody knows what's happening with Adani. They're keeping us guessing. I do think that Australia is going to change, but I think it's an incredibly innovative country. I think Australia is a very exciting country, and it has that potential to be a leader, and it always has, especially in the last 10 years or 15 years. And people see the property industries leading. They see other, parts of industry coming up with innovative ideas. And we are now getting Sanjeev Gupta, who's from Arium Steel, who says he can power aluminium smelters with renewable energy. That, to me, is changing the game. And you've got solar becoming cheaper than coal, especially for new power. Places like India starting to put solar ahead of coal. We will have to change, but we also have to move away from the horse and buggy. That change had to happen.
Yeah. So you're on the forefront of all this change. What news recently has been exciting you?
Well, there's the technical innovations, which are always fantastic, and they're coming out at a rate of knots, and we're sort of, we can't even keep up with them. Every week there's an amazing new technology that makes solar cheaper, more efficient, paint on solar cells, etc. But I think the really exciting innovations at the moment are in finance. Mm-hmm. And if you get the financial market starting to look at the investment potential in sustainability and renewable energy, then good grief, we are going to win this thing. At least we're going to try. I'm not saying that we've got enough time to turn back the climate clock, but we can be doing an enormous amount. Yeah,
I reckon we'll be in for a good crack at it. But on this topic of change, in the future, what advice for professionals do you have in the buildings industry?
Advice for professionals? Well, I think they've got to be really innovative and open-minded, and I think you've got to let go of the past. And the building industry has been very conservative in many ways. At the top end, it's very innovative in the engineering field, but in the way we build houses, my goodness, we haven't changed in 100 years. We're still building pretty well cardboard boxes and making them open plan because we're telling people it's groovy to have open plan, but then they're impossible to heat and cool. So I think we've got to be really open-minded and realise that sector's got to change enormously. And the building professionals that are open and innovative and will let go of the past are the ones that will be successful, I think.
As we get toward the end now, what do you think will have the biggest impact on the buildings industry in the future?
Well, I think we've got we've actually got to embrace complex systems thinking. And that's the new event we've got coming up for Tomorrowland 2018. We're looking at, we're calling it the urban story, because to me that's going to drive everything. The way we shape our cities, transport, location of jobs and people. How do they get around? You've got AVs coming at us. You've got so much technology that it's actually quite dazzling at the moment, and no one knows really how to deal with it. Those things are going to really shape the way we live. I mean, I can't imagine a world where it's, got bumper-to-bumper driverless cars and drones overhead. I mean, people will sort of just sit in their little pods and not get out of them. I mean, that's not a human existence to me. So we've got to hang on to our humanity and make sure that we're controlling this agenda, not letting it control us.
Yeah, who knows what's going to happen in the future. There's so many individual technologies. You mentioned drones and driverless cars and artificial intelligence and things like that. All of them by themselves have the potential to disrupt a lot of things. But when you combine them all together, we really don't know what could happen in the next few years.
I know, it's actually quite terrifying because they're coming at the speed of light. And I mean, Uber said about 6 months ago, we're going to have a trial of flying cars over Sydney by 2022. And you tell people, they go, rubbish. And I go, sorry, they said, 3 years ago, they said driverless cars was rubbish. And they're now driving around. We've got trials at universities with buses. So it's actually, I think it was Oscar Wilde that said the past is the hardest thing to imagine. So this, we get used to the new technology so fast, but what's coming now is it's actually shot up many notches. You've got, I think with artificial intelligence, we've really got to take Stephen Hawking's warning seriously and really try to understand what it's doing. And yes, it can have great benefits and all that data collection, but it's also got the potential to take us over because guess what? It's going to be smarter than us in the end.
That's right. That's I'm still trying to get my head around flying vehicles in 5 years or for less than 5 years. That's
less than 5 years. Exactly. We haven't got time for a 5-year plan even.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And you mentioned earlier Tomorrowland. As we get toward the end now, what do you have any information about that available for people to find out more?
Oh, yes, we've just finished the first draft of the editorial for it, the content. It's going to be fantastic. We're calling it The Urban Story and 3 Critical Questions, 3 big questions. And that's, when you think about it, it's actually the fundamentals, the sustainability. So we're looking at how we're going to integrate with ecology because that is what we need to do to survive as human species on the planet. Number 2 is how we're going to pay for it. Number 3 is, what are the social impacts of these things. We haven't actually got it up on our website soon, but it will be coming. I think we're looking at a September date. It's all unconfirmed at this stage, but I'm pretty sure it's going to happen and we're very excited about it.
Definitely. And if people want to find out more about that, I guess they can subscribe to your email list. Is that right?
Yes, or just get in touch at editorial@thefifthestate.com.au. Ask for Tina or Cameron or anyone here and we can help keep them in touch.
G'day guys. Adam Jones here. Just one quick thing before you go and enjoy the rest of your day. Would you like to join the email list to receive half-yearly reports on the things that are shaping the building industry? The latest special report will look at the top 5 technologies that are shaping the whole building industry. Because if you don't think technology is going to change your job, then you've probably been living under a rock or something like that. It can be downloaded on the front page of the website www.futureofstructures.com. Thank you very much, guys. Enjoy the rest of your day.